Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Drippings of the Honeycomb. I'm your host, Rebecca Shower, and I'm so incredibly excited that you're here because today is Testimony Day. Now, if you've been here before and you're thinking to yourself, Rebecca, you already filmed your testimony episode, why are you doing it again? Basically, there were some errors, there were some things that went wrong, and I really just feel like I should film it again. But rest assured, if you've heard it before, there will be new pieces of it that maybe weren't shared or something new that you can get out of it. So I don't want this to be like a discouragement, like, oh shoot, I've already heard it. Like next, like there's so much that happens in my testimony. There's something new that can encourage you, and just like be good to hear. I know every time I tell my testimony, I'm like, dang, I lived through it, but it's so encouraging and uplifting just to hear. So yeah, trust you're not just going to hear the same thing on repeat again if you've already heard it. If you haven't heard it and you're new here, this is the perfect episode to be new here. Like, girl, you're about to hear all these crazy things that God did and just how wonderful and amazing He is. So, yeah, I'm so excited for all of you to be here. But some housekeeping items. First, socials. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, at the same handle that the YouTube channel and the Spotify channel are. So, everything is at DOTHC podcast, which once again is at DOTHC podcast. So I post fun little updates, get ready with me, stuff like that across those socials. So I'd love to have you guys check it out if you haven't seen me on those platforms. Second, okay, I don't have a song of the week for you guys this week. However, I just feel like I need to make a correction. Okay, last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. Wait, hold on. A month ago, oh my goodness. An entire month ago, but 2 episodes ago, I told you guys that the song of the week was Son of Sorrows. It's actually Man of Sorrows by Lena Jade. I'm actually so fake fan for that. I was thinking of that song by Maverick City, that's Son of Suffering, and I kind of combined the two names. So, in case y'all couldn't find it, the song of the week a month ago was Man of Sorrows by Lena Jade. Still so bomb. Still sitting on the fact that, shoot, this can be the song of the week again. It's such a good song. Indie, everything. Okay, those are the housekeeping items. Let's pray and get into the episode for the week. Lord, I just thank you for everyone who's listening right now. That they're here, that they've for some reason decided to trust in you or just be curious about you. Lord, I pray that you continue to stir their heart and just like encounter them and help them know you more. I pray that you just like drive that hunger, like whatever it is that got them listening. Just keep like spurning that, like keep helping them grow in encounters with you and knowledge of you. Just deepen their relationship with you, God. So I just pray for a peace and a joy and just like a grace to settle over all of this, and a comfort for like all the listeners, that they would just hear this and feel your presence. They would feel you. Lord, I pray that your hand would just be so on this, that this would not be about me and what I've experienced, but it would actually be about you and what you've done for me. And that would be the focus of this, that you and you alone would get the glory from any and all of this. So in Jesus' name we pray, amen. Now, before we actually jump into my testimony, I just want to share some scripture with you guys about why testimony is so important. Testimony, like, this is biblical. Like, we're not just out here sharing our stories to, like, amp our ego. Like, this is not just, like, a fun little get to know you because I want you guys to know more about me. But it's actually biblical. And let me give you the scripture proof. So, Revelations 12, verse 11 says this. And for reference, let me explain. Revelations is like a very poetic book, but I'll explain to you like what this metaphor means and like what each thing means in here, okay? So he's having a vision of basically how in the end times Satan is defeated. And he's talking about us, he's talking about people. And here's what it says. It says, and they have defeated him, they being believers in Jesus. If Jesus is Lord of your life, you're they in this verse. And they have defeated him. Now, him is the enemy, Satan, the epitome of all evil, essentially. Everything wrong with this current world, all the demons, all of that. They. Great. Nope, him. Okay. And they, the believers, have defeated him, Satan, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. These are the two things. And then it says, and they did not love their life so much that they were afraid to die. Here's what this verse is saying. Satan, now and all the way in the end times, here's how he's defeated. 1, the blood of the Lamb, which stands for Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, Satan's done. Like, shoot, it says in another verse in the Bible that when Jesus rose, he defeated death, sin, and the grave. He defeated the enemy. The enemy's cooked. He's done. He's powerless in the face of Jesus' blood. So that's why you'll hear a lot of prayers that say we plead Jesus' blood, because it's by Jesus' blood that we can overcome the enemy. Great. Okay, what's the second thing? And by the word of their testimony. Now, I find it so interesting. I don't know about y'all. I find it so interesting that a verse would compare Jesus' sacrifice with something like testimony. Maybe not compare, but put on a similar level. Combined, they do the same thing. Why is that? Let me tell you something. The reason that testimony is listed out in this verse like this, the reason that testimony is so important for all of us is because when we speak it out, when we remember it, when we say it, we are so encouraged that we're able to stay strong and stay firm in our faith. It's like the blood of the Lamb, like Jesus did that on the cross. That has been done. Great. But now our testimony, sharing in our testimony, is like a reminder of what Jesus did on the cross. We're just saying it in a new light. We're saying, hey, Jesus delivered me from this. He is so good. He's so powerful. And it actually reminds us of the cross. It reminds us of Jesus' sacrifice. Because all these things that we've experienced, close relationship with God, because that's what testimony is. Like, how have you formed a close relationship with God? Close relationship with God is only possible because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. We would not be able to be one with God in the way that we can be today if Jesus hadn't died. So when we share our testimony and talk about why we're close to God, we're remembering Jesus and everything he did for us. And we're also we're stomping on the enemy. We're saying, oh, shoot, look at what God did for me. Like, he is so good. And it's also, like, you don't even have to have gone through, like, some crazy things. Part of your testimony can really just be, hey, the Lord has protected me from so much. Hey, I grew up in a Christian household. Both my parents were strong believers. They were always praying over me. And the Lord protected me from so much because of their faithfulness. Look how faithful he is to you and your family. That's the Lord's goodness. You could have gone through so much and you didn't have to because of that. Like, that's still a testimony to God's goodness. You understand? And so sharing crazy experiences that you've been through that God has delivered you from, sharing any of that as an encouragement, a reminder of God's power in your life, a reminder to keep seeking him because of all he's done for you. But also, when you hear, like, other people say what they've been through, like, some of y'all are going to hear this, and you could be currently experiencing things that I've been delivered from. And that's part of the reason I'm sharing this. Like, I want this to be an encouragement for you guys to be like, oh, shoot, wait, God did it for her. He can do it for me. Because he can. He can. Quite frankly, he can. And so let me hit y'all with one more verse. I believe it's in Luke. About Jesus, in a sense, sharing his testimony. Jesus sharing the scars he went through, Jesus talking about the cross. Here's what he does. Okay. So he appears to all of his disciples that were following him. And at this point, the disciples are just grieving him. They're so upset. And he appears to them. And initially, they don't recognize him. They think it's just a random dude because he hid himself. They're not stupid. He didn't allow them to recognize him. And they're walking along, and they explain to this quote-unquote random dude everything that's been happening. They're like, oh my gosh, how have you not heard? Like, it's this crazy thing. All of the religious leaders of the Jewish people at the time are all, like, riled up. And then there's this huge, like everyone is, it's so controversial because this murderer got set loose. Like, this is the talk of the town. Y'all got to understand, Jesus being crucified was the talk of the town. And they're like, how does this dude not know about it? And they're explaining to him. And then he's like, hey, yo, actually, guess what? It's me. And that's where it picks up. So they're like, oh, what the heck? Like, it's Jesus? And they're so scared. They're like, oh, maybe he's a ghost. And so starting in Luke 24, verse 18. Wait, hold on. Verse 38. Right. Knew something was wrong there. Okay. Verse 38. Here's what it says. This is Jesus speaking. He says, "Why are you frightened? Why are your hearts filled with doubt? Look at my hands. Look at my feet. You can see that it's really me. Touch me and make sure that I'm not a ghost, because ghosts don't have bodies, as you see that I do." And as he spoke, he showed them his hands and his feet. So here's what I want to emphasize here. When Jesus died, he could have been completely healed, completely made new. And yet he still has scars on his hands and on his feet. He still has scars. Those weren't fully gotten rid of. Can I tell you why? It's laid out right here. When he says, "Look at my hands, look at my feet," the scars that were left on him are evidence of what he went through. And they're a testimony to God's goodness and God's power. They're a testimony to the fact that, he was actually crucified. If you don't know what crucifixion is, basically he was strung out and he had nails go straight through both of his palms and through his feet. So he had hole shaped scars, hole marks in his hands and in his feet, proving that he was actually crucified. But they were healed. He wasn't actively dying, which is proof that he rose again, that God healed him. You understand what I'm saying here? Those scars are a testimony to what God did in his life. And so he's showing the disciples them as proof of what he's gone through and where he is because of God. Are y'all picking up what I'm putting down? Let's apply this for our life. You're going to have scars. We live in a fallen, broken world. You're going to have things that hurt you. You're going to have things that upset you. But just like Jesus, when those things are fully healed, okay, let's maybe not bleed all over everyone around us. For sure, let's share what we're going through with people around us. Not every piece of information is for everyone. But when you're healed from those scars, shoot, let's bring it to the crowd. Let's say, look, you guys actually know what I went through. You know that I was struggling with this. You know that this was a problem in my life, but look, it's healed. You know why? Because God is so good. God is the healer. And it's a testimony to God's grace. Do you guys understand that? Just like Jesus shared his scars, so do we. So do we. Oh, that is so good. Shoot, we could end the episode here. Shoot. But we're not going to do that. You know why? Because I'm about to share my scars with y'all and say, look at my hands. Look at my feet. Look at what I've been through. And look how good that God is because of what I've been through. So let's run it back all the way in the beginning of my life. I grew up in a Christian home. My parents were Christian. I would say it was more cultural than anything. I think, I don't know. We went to church. I'll say that. And it kind of felt like a show to me. I got to be honest. As a kid, I believed in God in the sense of I believed he was real because it's all I really ever knew. But I would see God in the church, and I would see miracles. There was miracles that happened in my church. I would see all these crazy things and be like, okay, yeah, he's for sure real, and I want to go to heaven. I don't want to go to hell. So I'll believe in him. But I didn't really see Christ exemplified outside of church. It was kind of we go to church, we do the right thing, because we want to go to heaven. And it was just a lot of chaos, a lot of anger outside of that. And so this very much started a pattern in my life of great, we go to church, we do the church thing, we put on the show, we act good, we act right. But outside of that, we can do whatever we want. Shoot, it's already been chaos. So I can keep the chaos, but make it into something I want it to be. You know what I'm saying? And also for reference, I'm going to just leave this little nugget here. I had a couple of eye surgeries when I was a kid. One right after I was born, one a little bit older that I can still vividly remember. And between those two eye surgeries, I went through a lot of treatments. Basically, I had a lazy eye and the eye was atrophying. My brain was only processing information from one eye. So both of my eyes could see perfectly fine, but because my brain was only processing information from one eye, my body was okay, we don't need to give energy to the other eye. And if we kept letting it be like that, I probably would have gone blind in the other eye. So lots of treatments, lots of things to help with that. And that was always very much when I hear my mom talk about it, I'm like, yeah, God's hand was just so on that, because there was all these little things, like things that she prayed for that lined up in a way she never would have expected, but it could have only been God. Like God's hand was so on each of the little pieces and steps of like all of my surgeries, like how they unfolded, how they happened. Like I was supposed to have another surgery after that, most likely, and we like switched up what was going to happen during the second surgery, and even just like affording it, like insurance stuff. It's crazy. It's like not that important. I won't bog you in the details, but I very much saw like God's hand in my life in that. So it's like, okay, I see this way that he's present in my life. I hear all these other people talk about him, see miracles in the church, great, God is real. But like I said, it was very much just like a show. I'm going to do whatever I want outside of the church. Church is for church is my mindset at this point. And so going into middle school, way past the eye stuff, I just like fell into a really, really dark place. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't want to be alive. To be honest, I hated everything about life. I didn't really feel safe or comfortable anywhere. Not to blame anyone for that. I was just definitely, I was like legitimately depressed. I was clinically depressed, and yeah, it was really hard. That's what I'll say. I don't want to like I said, I don't want to bog you guys down in the details, or like tell you these things I did, because I remember I would listen to other people talk about their depression, and I would like get ideas from the things that they were doing. But I definitely let myself spiral. A lot of bad coping mechanisms, a lot of bad habits. I attempted suicide more than once. So when I tell you it's truly by the grace of God that I'm here, like I really, 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 if it were by my own hands, I would be dead right now. Quite frankly, just like the fact that I'm sitting on a couch in front of you, or like in your speakers, if you're just listening, is such a testament to God's character and his mercy and grace. Because yeah, shoot, like if it were up to me, I would not be here. But yeah, so for years I struggled with depression, with suicidal thoughts. And one thing I do want to confront, just like while we're on the topic, there were times where I convinced myself that I wasn't depressed, and I didn't open up, didn't tell anyone, didn't even tell doctors, for years of struggling, because I just saw it portrayed only one way in the media, that it was only ever really bad. And because sometimes it would be really bad, but sometimes it wouldn't be. Sometimes I would be fine. I was like, oh, maybe I'm faking everything. Maybe I don't have depression. Let me just not tell anyone. And so like if that's you, if you're on the other side of the screen and you're struggling, you maybe are convincing yourself that you don't have depression, or you're out there romanticizing what depression looks like. I just want to confront that and say depression is really, really hard and terrible. And like it's okay to reach out and get help. It's can be scary to let people into what you're experiencing. But I think it's scarier to experience it alone and convince yourself that you're lying to yourself. Let a doctor know if you're going to a doctor. Like, get a therapist. They are trained in how to help you, and you don't have to walk that out alone. So yeah, don't convince yourself that it's not real. Like, the worst that can happen is you go to the doctor, tell them what you're experiencing, and they tell you it's something else, Like, if you think there's even an inclination, just reach out for help. That's like the biggest way the enemy moves. He wants to isolate you and convince you that you're not struggling as badly as you are. And the isolation and convincing yourself that you're lying only ever makes things worse, and things compound. Anyway, so I'm struggling with depression, suicidal thoughts. I also started struggling with an eating disorder. I was a dancer, so it was very tied around like my dance schedule. Starve myself for days before a competition, make sure I was skinny for like all the right times in the dance season. And yeah, very restrictive. Again, lots of bad habits that like I'm not trying to give anyone ideas out here, but it definitely controlled my life. It wasn't like, it was controlling how my body looked at times, controlling what I ate, what I didn't eat, more like. And yeah, when I think back, it was just such a scary place to be in, with all these mental health things compounding. And I also want to confront that too. Well, while I'm at it too, we're calling it out. I remember when I was struggling with an eating disorder, I sort of convinced myself that I didn't really have an eating disorder, because it wasn't like I was always starving myself or always making myself throw up or always binge eating. It's like I was always just doing one thing, It was like a rotation. It was tied to a schedule of when people would see me, how they would perceive me, like what context they would see me in. And so I was like, well, it's not even that bad because I can't fully force myself to ever do one. When in reality, majority of eating disorders, like statistically, you can look up studies, majority of eating disorders aren't just anorexia, they aren't just bulimia, they're actually a combination of lots of disordered eating habits, and like body dysmorphia is tied in there of like perceiving yourself in a certain way that's not necessarily true, trying to change the way that your body looks. All of that is an eating disorder, and you're probably in the majority if you're going, well, I can't even fully control it, so it's not a real eating disorder. Nah, you're just like pretty much every other eating disorder out there. And so, like I said, like there is help to be had for you out there. You don't have to live stuck in that. But yeah, I just want to confront that lie, because it's not true. Like, even if you feel like you can't quote unquote control it correctly, it still is a problem, and it's still hurting you and harming the way that you see and accept yourself. And honestly, it's probably harming the way that you see other people. I know it was for me. Like, I would always be comparing my body to other people's. So I was degrading other people. So you're hurting yourself and you're hurting your relationships with other people. So yeah, please reach out and get help. Anyways, all these things being said, drowning in mental health. Clearly, this is spiraling. At this point too, like I was going to church for a while, but by the time we hit like early high school, I didn't really care. I didn't want to go. I would make up excuses. I played 2 sports year round, so I would use competition, stuff like that as an excuse to not go. Oh, I'm tired, I'm recovering, to not go. Didn't care. In my head, I grew up Christian my whole life. I had been to church. I had put in my time, so I was going to heaven, and that's all that mattered. But for some reason, like, I actually remember vividly thinking, yo, Christians are kind of boring, and I really don't want to live the way that they live. All I've ever seen my entire life is hurt and pain. And it kind of sucks over here, but the people in the world are having fun. And I was like, I know when I go to college, I'm just going to party. So why would I not just like stop being a Christian? Like, what's the point of it? Like, I really just saw Christianity as like a social function. I knew the terminology of having a relationship with God, fully couldn't, like, I didn't even understand that I didn't understand what that meant. You know what I'm saying? So I was fully like ready to give up my faith, didn't care. Like, thought I was going to heaven if it was real, but like was like, shoot, I'm out of this, John. But I remember I grew up in a Christian school, and I would have Bible classes, and there was one specifically. It was actually an Old Testament survey, which is so funny. But there was so much evidence presented in this class about not just what was in the Bible, but so much evidence outside of the Bible that proved the Bible and proved God and all these things. And it would be like hit after hit. I would go to a class and be like, oh my gosh, like, dang, that's like I can't deny this now. Too much logical proof in my brain that I couldn't deny it. And I was like, okay, I have the logical proof. I guess I want to go to heaven, right? So keep going about life. We get to my sophomore year. Everything's kind of compounding. At this point, my identity is fully in my sports and academics. I feel like I'm never doing enough, always trying to do more, always putting stuff on myself, while at the same time also struggling so terribly with all my mental health. And it was all just a cycle that made like itself worse. You know what I'm saying? So like if I played bad in a sporting event, got a not so great grade, makes the mental health worse. When the mental health is worse, then it affects how I play. And you know, all the things, it's just like a compounding spiral where the pits were really deep. And so yeah, I was spiraling. It was getting worse and worse. I think that maybe if God hadn't intervened, yeah, I don't know if I would be here. Scary things to say, but you know, you live and you learn. Here we are now. Anyway, so I go to summer camp, right? At this point, it's logically proved to me I'm still doing the Christian thing because I think that's what's right. I go to summer camp this summer after my sophomore year. And let me tell you, this encountering God changed my life. Like, you can know a whole lot of head knowledge, and it means nothing in the face of actually knowing Him and actually encountering Him. And this is where I encountered Him for the first time. So I remember on the second night of camp, we're standing there, we're worshiping, someone comes and prays over me. And I don't really entirely know how it happened, but I remember after someone prayed over me, it was just like a full worship service. And I go and I sit down in the corner, and it was like God just revealed himself to me. Like, I was sitting on the floor, and for the first time ever, like, when I tell you I had done the church thing my whole life, I had been at church every week, I had gone to all the camps, I had never experienced anything like this. For the first time, I was just praising God because I could actually see who he was. It was like a sliver of his character was revealed to me, and I just saw his goodness and his grace and his mercy, and I couldn't help but praise him. And I was just sitting here so like overflowed by love. And when I tell you, my entire consciousness, it just felt like pure bliss. It was like a sliver of heaven that honestly I don't think I'll ever experience again on earth. Like, I'll experience it one day when I'm with Pops in heaven. But I just remember like being so overcome by bliss and joy. And I was like, wow, like, this is what this feels like. This is God. He is relational. Like, he loves us, and he has all these actual character traits. Like, he's an actual being, and they're all so good and incredible. And so I'm sitting here singing out praises and all these things. And this sparked like a little fire in me. I'm out like praying over people the rest of the week, telling people about how great and amazing he is and how he wants them all to experience him and all these things. And I remember, I guess the last night so it was like the big night, and like nothing really crazy happened. And I remember I walked out, I left, and I was like, dang, like how am I supposed to go back to the real world now? I've set up for myself such terrible things. Like, back in the real world, all I've set up for myself is pain and brokenness. I'm going to go back to being depressed and suicidal and struggling with an eating disorder. I'm going to go back to a messy home life and friendships that, honestly, I wasn't a good friend. Friendships that were hurting me. I was hurting other people. I didn't want to go back to any of it. I didn't want to go back to the pain and brokenness. And I remember being like, God, why didn't you heal me? I've seen you do miracles at this camp. Like, why? You know, like, what's going on? But, then I go play 9 Square, drop the thought as soon as it came, basically. And then after, it's like the last night, we gather in our cabins, and as we're like packing, our leader is like, hey, like, can everyone come in one room? And I just want you guys to share what you guys experienced this week, how you saw God. And in sharing how we saw God, we actually ended up opening up, and everyone was sharing like all the struggles of their life. And I remember confessing everything. When I tell you, I had kept all of this so secret inside of me. I didn't want anyone to know. And I confessed completely, like, hey, yo, I'm struggling with depression. I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts. I'm struggling with an eating disorder. I'm struggling with my identity being in what my coaches say about me. I'm struggling with my grades, with all of these things that I feel like define who I am. And they all like start praying over me. I mean, we all kind of pray over each other. Other people are talking about things they're struggling with, and we're worshiping, praying, literally sobbing until, when I tell you, 4 a.m, I'm not even being dramatic, literally 4 a.m, we're praying, crying, sobbing. And all of a sudden, it's like I felt like if you lift, when you squat, and you re-rack and you step back and you like sit up and you just kind of roll out your shoulders, and it's like you can feel the weight gone. And you just feel like, oh my gosh, I can stand up straight for the first time, because this burden that was on my shoulders has been lifted. I literally like tangibly felt it. And I knew in that instant, I was like, yeah, he healed me from suicidal thoughts. He healed me from depression, everything. Like, glory to God. He completely healed me. And rest assured, he did. Like, he is so good. Completely healed me from all of it. And I walked out of that camp never experiencing it again. And here's something that I do want to be very careful to say. All of these things that I was struggling with, my identity being in sports and in my grades, with all these mental health issues, God like pulled me out of the pit and set me on even ground to be with him. Some people, he's maybe not going to pull you out of the pit. He's going to throw a ladder in the pit and help you climb out. And here's why. Because, I can still see the pit. It would be so easy for me to fall back into that again if I let myself. I'm going to keep it straight with you. Like, just because he healed me doesn't mean that I couldn't go back. Like, we have free will. You know what I'm saying? But because I've seen the ground up here, I never want to go back. Because he's shown me the beauty and the glory of being in relationship with him, like, I never want to go back to that pain and brokenness and that dark pit of coping mechanisms that actually only ever hurt me more. So I want to be an encouragement today in 2 ways. Like, he did it for me. He can do it for you. God is still in the business of healing. I'm gonna keep it so straight with you. Like, I would not be here if he didn't heal me, quite frankly. Like, for sure he healed me. But he can do it for you, so believe for it. But maybe he's not going to heal you. Maybe he's going to let you climb out of the pit so that you never want to go back. Maybe if he just pulled you out of the pit, you would fall right back in, and that's not what he wants for you. In things like this, I think it can be really hard to hear and say, well, why did God deliver them and he hasn't delivered me from that? But it's like, what do you need to learn from this? You know what I'm saying? Because maybe you would be much stronger in your faith, way better foundation if you have to claw your way out with God's help. Maybe you would be much stronger in your foundation if he brought you out yourself. Believe for both things either way. But rest assured that God knows you best, and he's going to work and move and operate in your life in the way that works best for you, in the way that's going to have the best outcome, because he loves you. He knows you best, and he loves you, and he wants the best for you. Okay, moving on. That being said, so I leave this week at camp literally like on fire, obviously, because God just healed me of all these crazy things, and I just experienced him in crazy ways and felt his love and all these things, right? You think, okay, great, Rebecca's good. No, Rebecca does not care for some reason. I remember leaving this camp and being like, okay, so basically, intellectually, it's been proved to me that God is real. Great. Okay, relationally, it's been proved to me that God is real. I've had this crazy encounter. But then here's what I took out of it. I was like, oh, so this must be what a relationship with God is, an encounter. So now when the super Christian people ask me what my relationship with God is, I'll tell them this encounter and go about my life. And in the meantime, I can live however I want to, because there's God's grace for that. Like, there's blood for that. I can go do whatever I want. So in middle school, I had got caught up in substance abuse. Nothing crazy. Like, I don't want to say I was a fiend or like an addict of any kind, because I want to like tell my story in a way that reflects truth and glorifies God only in truth, you know? And it's like, if I didn't struggle with that, I didn't struggle with that. But I will say I was definitely using, you know? Like, if I was out with my friends, yeah, shoot, like we can do a little something. So I was still doing that, like, did not care, did not want to care, did not let myself feel any type of way about it. I was like, yeah, we're gonna go hang out with my friends, we're gonna go smoke, we're gonna go drink, we're gonna go to that party. I was also like a gossip. I was so mean, I was so rude. I just, like, nothing about me was reflecting Christ. And part of it was like, I just hadn't seen that in any close relationships in my life. I hadn't seen anyone reflect the fruits of the Spirit, so I didn't really know that was something that could happen. Like, I didn't allow it to happen because I wanted to do whatever I want to do, and I was like, yep, there's blood for that. I can go sin and do whatever I want, and Jesus will forgive me, and I'll still go to heaven. Do you see how my focus was constantly on heaven? Like, this is a lie that our society tells us, that it's just about heaven and hell. Baby, it is not just about heaven and hell. Like, we gotta focus on this life. We gotta focus on what actually having a relationship with God can bring you in this life, because it's so much better. His plans for us are so great. And life is just, like, even though it can get harder, it's so much better experiencing it with God, because we were literally created to be with him. You know, you're like missing a piece of yourself when you're not in relationship with God. Anyways, I digress. So my whole junior year, I'm like out doing whatever I want. Didn't care. No type of conviction. Like, didn't let myself feel anything. I was like, great. Then we get to camp again next year. And at this point, I took camp very seriously. And I will say, I was going back to church at this point. I was just very much like, in the church, I'll stand on business. I love Jesus. Like, we love Jesus in the church. Outside of the church, didn't care to make my faith my own, for real. Like, I would read my Bible here and there because it felt like, oh, maybe that's the right thing to do. Didn't care. Went out and did whatever I want. We get to camp the next year, and I took camp very seriously. This was one of those church moments where I was like, yes, God is going to move. God is going to do crazy things. So I remember, like, the night before going into this camp, I was like really stressed. I stayed out way too late. I wasn't doing anything bad. I just like shouldn't have stayed out that late with my friends, and I hadn't packed at all. And so I'm like super stressed trying to pack. I ended up going to bed at like 3 a.m. and I had to get up at 6 a.m. to make the bus to get to camp. And So in the middle of this, I'm like, dang, like I'm so stressed. I'm so upset. I just want to write out my camp expectations, like what I want out of this week. And I go and write, and I end up writing like 5 things down. And I think 3 of the 5 things were talking about how I was just like an angry person and that I needed help from that. Like I had no business being that angry to my family, to my friends, to anyone. Like especially with my family, it's like it would just like rise up out of nowhere. Like someone could say something not even that crazy, and all of a sudden I was like at your throat, so upset for, girl, no reason. Like, girl, let's calm down. Like in hindsight, but in the moments, like I didn't realize how bad it was, but it was slowly starting to dawn on me, like, hey, maybe this is a little irrational. So I write it down in my little camp expectations, and then we go to camp. First day, great, yay, woo. We get to the second night, and I remember something just like irritating happened, and I was like trying to just like stay calm and be like, no, just like have fun, pretend none of it's real, just shove down your feelings. But I was actually like upset over what happened. And I remember we're in worship on the second night, and I was like, dang, God, like I actually don't want to be here. I want to go sit in the bathroom and cry because I'm so upset right now. And honestly, I've never been more glad that I stayed. I saw this like TikTok somewhere that like oftentimes when you don't want to be somewhere like really strongly for like a reason you can't place, it's because God has something for you there. And like I couldn't give you the biblical evidence for that, but I found that to be true like quite a few times in my life where I strongly don't want to be somewhere, and all of a sudden God just moves and does something crazy, and I'm like, yeah, so this is what you had for me. But so anyways, I'm sitting there crying. I'm like, yo, if nothing happens in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm leaving this John. I don't want to be here. And then someone comes up to me and they start praying over me. And literally, as soon as they start praying over me, I faint. Now, let me confront this. I did not faint because I didn't have enough food. I did not faint because of an iron deficiency. I did not faint because of anything in the physical. I fainted because I was so overcome by the presence of God that I literally like didn't know how to act. Like I fell. I was so overcome by the spiritual that like lost sight of the physical on the ground. And I remember I'm like laying there, like not even fully aware of what's around me. And I feel God say to me, like, if you want this thing gone, you have to fight it. And instantly when I heard him say that to me, like it wasn't an audible thing. I just like felt him say it to me. I felt like rage bubble up in my stomach. Like I literally felt it, and I was like, that's all the anger that I've been struggling with. Not even just anger, like literal pure rage. And I was like, okay, dang, okay, he wants this gone, so I gotta fight it. And over the next like 2 hours, I'm on the floor like crying, praying, being like, God, like help. And I felt this bubble of rage like that started in my stomach literally come up and like out of my mouth. And I remember walking out of this service, I had like never felt more free. It wasn't as tangible as when I was healed from depression and felt the weight lifted off my shoulders, but it was just like my body felt lighter, if that makes sense. And I remember like everything I was upset about, I was like, dang, I didn't even need to be upset about that. And even like leaving camp, just going from there into beyond until now, like I just am so much like freer and happier and filled with joy. Like it was actually irrational rage that was like bogging me down, and God set me free from it. Like he's so good, he set me free from it. And so the next day I ended up like going and getting baptized. Ironically, I had planned to get baptized for like six months beforehand. At this point was planning that exact day. So the Lord was really preparing me. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I do want to say, like, while we're at it, that was a spirit of anger. For months, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to think about the demonic and that potentially it had affected me. That was a spirit of anger that I had been freed from. It was completely irrational because it wasn't natural. It was a spiritual issue that I had been free from. So praise the Lord for delivering me, setting me free. I go and get baptized, and it felt like I was walking on clouds. It was just so crazy. It was so just filled with peace. Like I've never felt more peace than right after getting baptized. And it was just like a very emotional, incredible time. And I remember leaving that camp, and it was just a difference. Like something about having a spirit cast off of you and then getting baptized, like the Holy Spirit inside of me was just, the Spirit really fell on me. And so I go back to regular life, and I wasn't entirely mentally convinced that I should give up how I was living before. I was still ready to go back, drink, smoke. Matter of fact, I did a couple times. But here's what started happening. I would get so convicted every time that I was like using substances or around people, just like saying things, doing things, acting in ways that I shouldn't. I would get so convicted. Yo, it's something about not having a demon in your ear, something about getting baptized. It was like the Lord was like, "Oh, you want to say you're mine? Okay, we're going to act like it. I'm about to convict you of all these things you're doing that you should not be doing." So it was like I just had to slowly like get rid of these things because I started realizing, oh, these things are actually hurting me. Oh, these things are actually kind of yucky. Oh, maybe I actually don't want to partake in these things. So we get to the first half of like, so camp was at the end of the summer. The first half of the school year, my senior year, was very much like tension, me kind of like fighting it. But like a lot of people started switching up on me. It kind of felt like everything in my life was going wrong at this point. Like I lost someone that was really close to me for a period of time. And I just like felt so alone in what I was doing, on top of like all the tension of just feeling like about the way I was living my life. It was just really isolating. I remember crying a lot and hitting a point where I was like, dang God, like shoot, you're the only one who's been there for me. So I remember, I think in January was my senior speech, and I can't pinpoint a specific time when my life completely turned around, but this was very much a trigger, I'll say. So remember, all the way back in the beginning, I told you guys that I had surgery on my eyes a couple times. Well, then in middle school, after everything is fixed with my eyes, I end up having to get contacts, and then I end up getting like diagnosed, I guess, with this disorder called snow vision syndrome. If you're curious, you can just Google snow vision syndrome. It'll pop up, it'll show you. Um, Basically, like everything looks grainy. There's like extra shadows, extra light, yada, yada, yada. And so, what I wrote my speech on, my senior speech, it's supposed to be on testimony. So, I wrote it on the fact that God was so evident in my life when I was a kid, when I had all these surgeries. But then all of a sudden in middle school, I get contacts. I have snow vision syndrome. Like we start finding out all these things, and I'm like, why did he heal me when I was a kid only to let me struggle with this? And so that was sort of like what the speech was about. Like, how do I trust God? Like, why did he provide in this way and not in this way? And the speech really was like, as I was writing this speech, it was like me realizing for myself, oh my gosh, wait, even though he hasn't maybe healed me in the way that I would expect, he has been so faithful. Like with my surgeries as a kid, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about it much on this episode, but with my surgeries as a kid, he was so faithful. Then in middle school, when I literally threw my life to ruin, threw my life away, made every wrong choice that I could, the moment I reached out and said, God, can you help me? God, can you heal me? He did. He pulled me out of the pit. Oh, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. Like, he's literally so good. Even up to like casting a demon. Like, the moment that I started realizing maybe this anger is irrational, maybe I should give this up to God. The moment that I write it down and say, God, maybe you should have this, he delivers me. He sets me free. And it was just like, I didn't even talk about all those things in the speech. I lightly alluded to them because I was not comfortable saying that in front of my whole school. For everyone, it was like a huge competition. Like, if you made the top 5, which I did, you give it in front of your whole school, like panel of judges. Like I was mic'd up on a stage. Anyways, so yeah, as I was writing this, I was like, he's literally been so faithful every step of the way, even though I can't understand this thing. Like, it's not for me to understand. I had this one liner that was like, I had been so caught up in seeing in the physical that I didn't even realize like I'll never be able to see in the spiritual, but God can. God can see so much more than I can. And if anything, not being able to see perfectly in the physical is a reminder that like I am so limited. I am nothing before God. He knows so much more than me. Why do I still try to take control of my life? Why do I still live in a way that doesn't glorify him? Why do I live in a way that actually degrades me just because I think it's more fun? Why do I actually live in a way that's actively hurting me because I trust myself more than him? Why would I trust myself more than him when I've clearly messed up my life again and again and again? And let me say this, in the moment, it didn't feel like I was messing up my life. In the moment, it felt like I was making the right decisions. In the moment, it felt like I was making the choices that were good for me, that were going to help me. But in hindsight, all they actually did was hurt me. And yet God was there to deliver me and pick me up and reset me again and again and again. And so after writing this speech, I was like, dang, like I need to give him everything. Like, not only am I being convicted all these things, but like I need to live out these convictions. I need to give up all these things I'm doing and just hand him my life. He can have everything. Like, it was this point of like, I've hit bottom here. I feel so alone and isolated, but he's been so faithful. He can have it all. He gets to be the complete Lord of my life at this point. I don't even want my own life anymore. Not in like a suicidal way, like a literally, Jesus, take everything. I'll live the way you want me to live. And so I did too. Like, I gave it all to him. And I've been through like so much at that point. Like, after the school year, I was working an outside job over the summer, and it was just literally me and God, like rebuilding so much stuff that I had let be broken and all these things, just like building the foundation for our relationship. And he's just brought me through so much. Like, he's led me in so many ways. Even having a podcast is something I never thought I would be doing, but it's like something he led me into, and like I love it. Like, he's so good to leave me here. And so yeah, so many stories that I could tell you of now living with God that are so incredible. That I think they're stories for another time. It's all things that we'll break into throughout the podcast. But I just want to emphasize here, like, life now, living fully with God and in close relationship with him, hasn't always been easy. It hasn't always been perfect. For sure I have struggles. For sure I have hard times. But it's so much different when it's in God's hands instead of in my own. Like, I just have a peace and a joy about my day that I couldn't explain to you other than the presence of God is with me. Like, I feel like I could honestly face some of the worst things ever and still be mentally and emotionally and like in a better state than I would have been when I was without God. I would be in a better state than I was when I was struggling with some things that maybe weren't even that hard, just because I'm with God. Like, maybe the world around me is harder, but I'm centered. Like, I can get through it in ways that I never could have before. And everything is just filled with so much joy. And like, the way he's blessed me, like, I just have to thank him. He's blessed me in so many incredible ways. Like, he's so good. But like I said, we'll talk about all of that another time. But yeah, I just want to encourage you, like, life with God is so much better. And if you're in that tension point of like, you don't know if you should give everything to him, you don't know if you want to, it can feel really scary. It can feel like you're throwing away everything you've ever known. Because quite frankly, you are. But I promise you, having gone through this for like 2 years at this point of like actually giving him everything, it's so much better. There's so many things that he led me into that I didn't understand, but there's so much joy and so much life that came out of them. And this is speaking on only 2 years. Like, wait until I'm 30, 40, 50 years down the line. I can't wait to see what God does. But it is so much better giving him everything. Everything. And that's something you have to experience for yourself. I could sit here and yap for 30 minutes and I still wouldn't be able to explain, but trust that it is so much better. So with that, I just want to encourage y'all to go into this week, be encouraged that all the things that God did for me, like, he can do for you. But I would encourage you, write out your testimony, write out how you've experienced God. And that's literally so okay if what you write down is, I don't think I know God. That is so okay if what you write down is, I've always been Christian. But find ways, if you're sitting here and you think you're truly a believer of Christ, like, how have you personally met him and encountered him? Where have you seen him move? Even if it's in protecting you, even if it's in not seeing crazy things, like, write it out, and it'll just create like so much more love for God and what he's done for you because you remember it. Like, that's what we talked about at the beginning. Remembering the testimony. Suddenly you're ready to stomp on the enemy. Like, sir, you can't touch me because God delivered me. God did. You can't come back around these parts because God already did that. Like, we are good. God protected me from that. We are good. Don't come near me. You feel? So yeah, go into this week. Think about your testimony. Ask your friends their testimony. Like, share in testimony. That's the biggest thing. This isn't just about me. Like, go into your week and share your testimony with others. Ask people to share their testimony with you because it's so encouraging. And that's how we defeat the enemy. By the blood of the Lamb, the work that Jesus already did for us. and by the word of our testimony. So with that being said, I love you guys so much, and go in peace. I'll see you in 2 weeks.